Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to make some steelhead trout and we're going to kind of pan fry it with a little bit of an herby butter. We're going to make some saffron rice and some green beans with onions, and we're going to bake up our almond pastry. We're going to whip that up. So let's start by getting our rice going because that's the thing that's going to kind of take us the longest. So we're going to do the wash of the rice because I know it seems a little ridiculous, but it is a very important step. So I'm going to put it in a fine mesh strainer. Don't put it in a regular colander or you'll lose half your rice. Fine mesh is where it is. And you're just going to rinse it. You don't need to rinse it forever. Just a good, 30 seconds to a minute does the job. But important, it's going to give you rice that's not mushy or stuck together, too starchy. Just works well. So we're doing 2 cups of it because it's going to be kind of a bigger part of our meal, on there. And I love a good saffron rice or yellow rice. So we're going to give it a good shake. In my pan over here, I've got 3 cups of water. So 2 cups of rice to 3 cups of water. It's a 1 to 1.5 ratio. There we go. I'm going to turn on my back burner to high. We'll give it a good stir. And then we're going to put in some saffron threads and a little bit of chicken bouillon. Let's give it a good mix first. Okay. And then we have our little saffron threads here. You can always crush them if you want to add more color out, but you're going to get really the kind of the same flavor of it. A little goes a long way. So we're going to put, a couple pinches in it. This is like a very, very lightweight herb, but it gives it a beautiful kind of coloring. I actually just ordered a bunch of saffron to be really fresh because I'll be making my saffron buns soon for Santa Lucia. So I was like, oh, this is all I have left. I need to get my big container. But we have a couple threads in here. And this is going to turn our rice this really pretty, beautiful yellow color. And it's going to give it a nice flavor. I think I'll put just a pinch more because they keep sticking to me. Okay, and then the second thing that we're going to add in here is a nice scoop of chicken bouillon so that our rice kind of has this lovely kind of chicken-y, saffron-y flavor to it. Very technical terms on there. And then we're going to whip up our almond pastry, which we didn't have enough time to do at lunch today. So we'll have that up, which my kids absolutely love. This is one of their favorite little dessert things that I make. We're going to add in just a good scoop. You don't need too much. We'll mix it in. Just kind of, I want to say maybe 2 teaspoons. Just making sure I get all of that bouillon off. But you can see that saffron is already giving our water in here a nice yellow color to it. My giant thing of chicken bouillon?
Nothing that was
No, well, I mean, it did a little bit, but the saffron did. This is a little bit. I gave it a little bit, but it's going to be richer because of the saffron. Trust me, it's science. It's stuff. The color spectrum. Okay, we got that going. And now here's our butter pastry. Delicious. I'm going to let it sit there. We're going to roll it out here in just a second. Look at this. See, saffron threads everywhere, and I don't want to get that in there. We're going to roll it out, and we're going to have saffron in our almond pastry. Let's get our pastry base made, or the goo inside of the almond paste for our pastry. Very thing. So we're going to start. Hold on to the boxes here. We've got 2 boxes. So I like to do this. So this is like a family recipe that I've twerked over the time to make it the best ratio. But we're going to use 2 boxes of the almond paste. There's a couple types. This is the brand I like, which is Solo. They make another type that you can get in the baking aisle, which comes in a tube. It does not work the same. So you kind of need this almond paste for it because the other one is too soft. And when I take it out, it's going to just look like marzipan on here. I've changed the recipe up to make it better. So that not the right word? You tweak a recipe?
You said twerk.
I guess, yeah, that's how my brain just made another verb in there. I tweaked it. That would be me. I told you, my brain is on the fritz here. Okay, so here is our almond paste. This stuff, it's, if you know what marzipan is, it's essentially marzipan. It is a sweetened almond paste that tastes like almond dessert, not like pure things. Break it up into chunks as you put it in. I'm doing mine in the blender. You can also do it in the food processor, but we're going to be mixing this with sugar and egg yolks and vanilla. So it's easier. It mixes up easier with this. Now, my tweak of the recipe is that I do double the filling to 1.5 of the crust of the recipe that was taught to me. And I think it turns out perfect because you get more of this delicious almond flavor in it. Now, if you've ever had, I always say, people are always like, what is this kind of like? And I say, the closest thing this is similar to is like Dutch letters, but it is way better than Dutch letters because there's so much more almond flavor to it because you have this almond filling between the two pie crusts, which is just delicious. So we've got our 2 boxes, which I think these are, yep. So it's about 1 pound of almond filling in here. And then we have 2 cups of sugar because, again, this is double my recipe or double the base one. And this is going to give me like this giant sheet of pastry. So 1, 2. And then we need 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract. And in a pinch, you could also, if you don't have vanilla, you could use an almond extract. I've done that before. There we go. So we've got our 2 teaspoons in here. Also, do not use almond pastry filling. That is very gelatinous and not the right texture at all for it. You're essentially making your own almond pastry filling with it. So don't use the canned one of that as well. We're going to put in 2 whole eggs plus, that egg wanted to crumble on me. There we go. Plus 2 yolks. And that yolk is just going to give it almost a thicker consistency in the middle so that it's not too runny. And you want the richness. You can't just sub out like 2 yolks for 1 whole egg because the richness of the yolks are really what give you the deliciousness. Now, I'm going to do mine in my Vitamix. You can also do it. I've done it in food processors or before, or like those little like Ninja blenders. Vitamix just works really well for this. So why do it? There we go. So I'm just going to start it on low. Give it a second, kind of almost do like the pulse. Mix it up a little bit, let it crumble. You don't want to go straight to it because then you'll get kind of a chunkier base. Now I'm going to move it up to about a 5. So we're pulsing it. There we go. I'm going to get my little spoon here, mix it down because this is a really thick base to it. So it is a little bit challenging to kind of work with, but it's worth it. I'm going to turn it down to a 1. Get it back on that slower base for it. And do the pulse. Don't just try to blend it right away because this is a thick thing. But you can see we've already got it mostly mixed up. You just want to avoid any of the thicker chunks for it. Mix there. We're almost done. but this is what we're going to be spreading between our two pie crusts. So I always say, think of it like the shape of a giant Pop-Tart, but it's going to be filled with an almond pastry. Okay, put our lid back on, and then we'll do a quick. There we go. See if I can move it up a notch. Okay, perfect. And this is essentially what it's going to look like. Nice kind of creamy paste for it. Looks like I have a little bit more to push down. So we'll get it just a smidge more. That's why I say you need the 4 eggs in here with the 2 yolks and the 2 eggs, because you need that liquid to make it a paste, but you can't have it too runny or it's not going to be thick enough and it won't set and it will make your pie crust too soggy. So we'll let it sit right here, kind of sink down a little bit, and then we're going to we'll put it in and blend it one more time before we spread it out, but we'll let it soak for just a second. Okay, I've got my 2 butter pastry crusts here for this. So we used a bunch earlier to make chicken pot pies and our lemon tarts. And when I made my pie crusts this morning, I made a quadruple recipe. So this is probably considered enough to make like 3 or 2 pies, so like 3 pie crusts or whatnot, because it's about, I would say what I have here is probably like a double recipe. But for my pie crust recipe, for just the base to make kind of like a simple pie with a lattice top on it, it's 2 sticks butter, 2 1/4 cups of flour, a teaspoon of salt, and about 9 tablespoons of ice cold water. And you kind of cut everything in it just like you would do biscuits or whatnot. We're going to roll out our dough. And this is where I have my big baking sheet. We're going to roll it out into a big rectangle on parchment paper, and we'll put it there. So let me grab my parchment paper here. Slide this up. We're going to get this going, and then we'll start working on our food. But luckily, this fish dish is a quick and easy dish to make, and we'll have that prepping up while we bake. So we've got our dough right here. I'm going to grab my heavy rolling pin. Don't just roll it out on this. Put a second sheet on top, because that's going to create a non-stick environment in the sense that you are going to be able to roll without your rolling pin having to stick or use extra flour. Now, this dough has been chilling in the fridge for a while, so it's a little bit firmer, but that means we're going to have an even flakier crust. I tried to set it out like 10 minutes ago so it'd warm up just a little bit, but you want it cold. It just means it's a little bit harder to roll out. But when I made our pot pies, you could see these just beautiful flaky layers on it. So I'm going to start by trying to roll it out into a rectangle first by just slowly pushing it out. You don't want it in a big circle because, again, we're putting it on a baking sheet, so we want it to be able to kind of transfer on there fairly easy. And then we're not going to bake this on like a parchment paper. We're going to bake it on the metal baking sheet, which is going to give it a nice kind of crispy crust on it. I think it just works. It bakes up a little bit nicer than if you bake it on the parchment paper. Okay. Let's see, our water for our base is starting to foam up a little bit, so we're getting a little bit closer on there. And roll this out. Let's give this a good stir real quick. Again, you just want to constantly stir it so you don't have any of your little sart there, but you can really see got a nice kind of golden color for it. If you really want a stronger yellow, you can crush up your saffron as well to put it in there. we go. Get this. And you can see we've got it rolling out. And I don't want to go, we're going to go a little bit thinner. This is about the thinness right here on this side is about how thin I want. So we just got to kind of roll this out about 50% more. Don't go paper thin because you need it to have a little bit of, you know, base to hold it on there so that you have a good kind of flaky, thick crust on both sides. This is where I say you get your workout in because rolling out cold pie dough while gives you the flakiest layers is definitely an arm workout here. And now when I do it, I don't cut mine into a perfect square. I keep it like a big crazy oval so that you don't lose any of your pie crust. You've got a big, huge kind of pastry. It doesn't have to be a perfect shape. Okay. Whew. 5-second break. Let's move. We'll come back to that in 1 second. My arms are getting tired of rolling it out. So let's season up our salmon a little bit. Or not our salmon, our steelhead trout. So in case you've never worked with steelhead trout before, it looks exactly like salmon. It tastes very similar to salmon. It has a slightly lower fat content than salmon. And a lot of people say it's not as fishy as salmon. So my husband really does prefer steelhead trout over salmon on there because it is just, you know, a less fishy meat or fish, I should say. But we're going to do just kind of like a thyme. Yeah, I think I'm just sticking with thyme for today. I was wondering if I was going to use some of my other spices in here. But we're going to do a thyme, garlic, fresh herb rub over it. And then I'm going to cut it up into different fillets. And then we'll kind of cook it in a nice, you know, mixture of butter and oil to kind of sear it off on here. It is does not firm up like salmon does, so it's a little bit softer and flakier than salmon does when you cook it. And another bonus side is it's typically a little bit cheaper than salmon as well. So pretty tasty fish. I always just tell my kids it's salmon. They all call it salmon because it really does look like it. I'll probably call it salmon like 3 more times tonight, but it is steelhead trout, which is in the rainbow trout family. And apparently they're like very similar to salmon in several ways, which I just found very interesting. Okay. I'll do a little bit more to fresh thyme. So we're going to have about 1.5 teaspoons of fresh thyme. I'm going to throw in some garlic that we'll mince up in here because we're just going to make this nice kind of herby paste. Got about 5 or 6 cloves of garlic. A couple of these are smaller, so I'm counting them as the same.
You have a question. How many pounds of trout is that?
This is about 2.5 pounds of trout. Now I did, because it was a thing, I always trim off the top and the bottoms that aren't as even so that when I do fillet it, I have it a little bit nicer on there. But it's a good fillet. At Costco, though, you really can only get big fillets, which is perfect for our family because then one big fillet will feed everybody. I will say now this one's a pretty good thick size steelhead trout. Steelhead trout in general is a thinner fish than salmon. So you're not going to get your super thick fillets out of it like you can with salmon at times. Okay, let's mince everything up. And then I'm hoping that my dough has warmed up a little bit over there that I can finish rolling it off without too much extra work. I always get there when I do pastries or whatnot. I always say, oh my gosh, I always remember how tiring rolling, because if you aren't used to doing a rolling pin all the time, it's a very different movement than any other basic regular movement that you do. So it's time. It's like when you have to hand whisk something forever. Okay, so here we've got our thyme, garlic, and green onion mixture, which is looking delicious. So we'll mince this up, and then we will kind of rub this over the top of our whole fillet. So we'll add this kind of great flavor in when we sear it off. Now, the steelhead trout does have skin on the bottom, so we'll only be seasoning one side.
You have a question? Can you go over the difference of when to use the green or the white part of the green onion?
So I find for garnishing, just use the darker green ones. If you are going to cook up your onion, green onion at all, you can definitely use the white parts. The white has a stronger onion flavor, so I do find that it needs a little bit of cooking. It's not as nice to garnish or eat added in fresh on there, just because it's a little bit stronger. Now, cooking it up, since I'm mincing it up, I can use the whole one because I don't have to worry about it holding its form as much. But the green onions, especially the darker green ones, they wilt a lot easier. And so they'll get mushy if you overcook them. Okay, now we've got this nice, lovely herb base that's going to add a lot of flavor. Wash my hands real quick. Get a little bit of that garlic and onion flavor off. It sounds like I've got a good bubble going on over here. Beautiful. So I'm going to give it a nice stir. And I'm going to put the lid on. We're going to turn this heat all the way down to low. We're going to let that rice simmer. Let me get my soup spoon. And now let's see if my waiting an extra few minutes, much better. Okay, now I can roll it out. Sometimes when that butter's cold, it's just so hard to work with it. Step away for 5 minutes and let it just warm up just a smidge. You don't want it to get, room temperature, but it is a little bit easier to work with when it's not straight out of the fridge. Okay. And you know what? Looks good. Just gonna roll this out. I was gonna use this big pan, but I think I'm gonna switch to a slightly smaller one because this one is really big and I don't need that big of one. Sometimes I make a really big batch of almond pastry and I'll do the full one, but not today. So I'll do one roll over it. We're gonna flip it out onto our baking sheet, and then we'll put our almond paste in it. We'll roll out our top. We'll put it on top. We'll poke lots of little holes over it with a fork, sprinkle some sugar, and bake it up. Okay. So you do it between, and that way you kind of create this non-stick surface. Let me grab my cooking spray. Here it is. We'll just do a quick little spritz. That just will help it so it doesn't stick too much. But again, put it on your baking sheet versus on parchment paper. That just, the butter cooked with the metal just cooks a little bit better. We're gonna flip it right over here, right in the middle, pretty even. Got it almost all the way out. We'll peel this off. There we go. And then let's blend our almond paste one more time now that it's kind of had a minute to set. Again, in here we've got 2 boxes of our almond with 2 whole eggs and 2 egg yolks and 2 teaspoons of vanilla. So let's start it. Give it a good mix. It's a very thick paste, so I don't want to mix it too much. Okay, I think we're good. So we've got our nice, lovely paste here. Now you can also do this in a food processor, or you can really go the old school way and do it in like cut it up and kind of mash it. The thing is, you just want to get it mostly blended up in there. That's why it was really key to break it up into chunks, because it does a little bit of work. It's okay if you have a couple little chunks in there because it all kind of brings together. You just don't want to have big blocks. There we go. And then we'll spread this out in just a second. But I kind of scoop it all the way around, try to get as much out of my little blender here as possible. And I think I got one more good scoop out of here. There we go. I'm going to move my blender out of the way. That way I have a little bit more room to work over here. And then we're going to fill this guy up. We'll pop him in the oven. Get ready to bake. So you're just going to spread this out as far to the edges as possible, you know, because you want to get this good flavor on everything.
You have a question? Can you go over the crust and the filling?
Yes. So this is a butter pie crust. So this is kind of like a double recipe. This morning I made like 4 times my normal amount because we made pot pies and lemon tarts with it. But this is made with just a base layer of it. So is 2 sticks of cold butter, a teaspoon of salt, a 2 1/4 cups of flour, all-purpose flour, and then you're going to add in about 9 tablespoons of cold water, ice cold water. Okay, let's flip this all the way out. So we've got it pretty much spread out, but you see how we have this nice kind of thick layer here. And we'll roll out our top and we'll put it on there. And this is a lot softer now, so it's not going to be as hard to roll out. Now, a lot of times when I do it, I pre-shape them into kind of a rectangle when I've molded them up so that they're a little bit easier to roll out. I'm going to smush it a little bit before I put my top layer on so that I can roll it out a little bit faster. Now this is going to have great flaky layers in it because we did our press and fold like method, where when you're kind of after you've mixed in your water, you don't knead the dough together. You press it over and fold, like you fold it over on top of each other, and then you press it down. Okay, so I'm just going to help it out, get it a little bit out there. And then we're going to roll it. And then you just want to roll it to about the same size as what you have or a smidge bigger. And so when you're using like your parchment paper, you can kind of see your lines from where you rolled out your first one, and you just roll it out kind of to that same specifications. If you're going to do it one, maybe to kind of keep it to where you make sure your second one is bigger, put a little bit more dough in your second dough batch, because you don't want to be short on it, because you need to be able to seal up all of the ends of your pastry, like pressed together, because if they're not sealed, it will ooze out. Okay. And then we'll pop this in the oven to bake and finish up making our dinner. But this is, I will say, this is a dessert or a treat that I have yet to truly find a bakery or a restaurant that has made something similar to this. The closest things that I have found are Dutch letters, but they're still very different. Okay, we're getting there. And I'm using a nice marble rolling pin because the heft behind it really does give you a little bit more force in moving it. It's funny because it's like I have several rolling pins, and this is the one I use, and I don't actually use it like this. I use it like firm going in there. And part of me is wondering, I'm like, why do I even need handles on it? Because I don't use the handles. I just use my own strength to push the dough out. And I think that also helps create really nice flaky layers. Okay, let's see. We're building. We're almost there. And then we get to do the fun part. This is all the work. So much work. And you know what? This is one of those desserts that is gone. The kids love it. All of my kids. I don't think I have a single one who doesn't like this one, which is nice because there's rarely desserts that everyone loves. There's typically somebody who's like, I don't like this. Okay, we're good. So we've got it. Try to make it nice and even. We're going to flip this guy over the top. And again, the parchment paper is your friend here because you can just lay it over the top. And then I should be able to peel it back. Again, you need your dough to be cold so that it doesn't stick too much, but pretty good. Now, what I like to do is if you happen to have any layers or things, you're just going to kind of go around first, and we're going to kind of pinch it all up together. Because again, you need it to seal up to trap all of that really delicious almond filling inside, because that's the star of this show. And if it oozes out, it doesn't cook the same as if it's stuck in this nice pastry. So we're going to pinch it all the way around. And if you have a tear in your pastry, but you have like an overflowage on somewhere else, just take it and kind of Frankenstein it and put it all together, patchwork it. Here we go. So now we have it all kind of pinched around like this. And now what we're going to do is we're going to go through with your fork in, not out, because you're kind of sealing it in and you're building a wall. You're going to push it to get down just like this. And then what we're going to do is we will poke a bunch of holes in it. Then you sprinkle some sugar over the top. You pop it in the oven and you bake it at 350 for about 20 to 25 minutes, depending on how big you make it. And it is done. There we go. So beautiful almond pastry here with our butter pie crust. You're going to poke these holes in here because that's going to allow that crust to get nice and flaky, the moisture inside to steam out to keep, again, your crust nice and flaky. And just don't go down so much that you poke through the bottom one, but you want to poke through that whole first top layer. And don't feel like you're adding too many pokes because you could always poke it a couple more times. There we go. And this is the key. You can't forget this step. You're going to take sugar and you're going to dust a light coating over the top of it, just like this. You want enough to where you can see your coating on it, but it doesn't need to have too much of a pile. Just enough to really coat it, because this, again, is just a basic butter pie crust. There's no sugar in that. And so this adds the nice little bit of sweetness, but all that flavor is coming in, again, from that almond pastry or that almond filling. Okay, let's go pop this up into our oven. And we're going to bake this at 350 and for 20 to 25 minutes. essentially, once it starts to get golden kissed, then you're going to be ready to take it out. And I found different ovens cook this at different times. It just varies, just really depends on it. So I'm going to put it in here. We'll do 23, halfway in the middle. And that should get us nice and perfect forward. But it can cook as early as 20 minutes if you have a smaller oven or cooks high or whatnot. Okay, let's get our our fillet of steelhead trout, all herbed and seasoned up so we can pan-sear it off. Okay, I'm gonna give it real quick a light drizzle of olive oil. And then we're gonna do a nice sprinkle of garlic salt. And I want this on first because I want this flavor, the saltiness at least to stick on there. I'm going to do a good amount because I'm about to rub it around. And again, we're only seasoning one side of this. The bottom half has its skin on, so you can't season it. But that will keep it nice and juicy. We're going to kind of pat it in there. Don't rub it. Patting it is going to allow those spices to stay on one thing. And then I'll use my non-fishy hand to grab these herbs. We're going to put it all the way across here. Again, this is our garlic, our thyme, and green onions. Now, you could always bake this or broil this off in the oven if you want it, but I'm going to cut it into fillets and pan-sear it. That way that garlic can really crisp up and add nice flavors into it. Beautiful. Again, that fresh thyme, the green onions, and the garlic are all just going to add a great flavor to it. And if you are kind of turned off by salmon, this is a good one to try because it looks like salmon, has a lot of similar qualities as salmon, has good omegas, but it's not as fishy tasting as it because it is a trout. Okay, I'm going to take my knife here and we're going to kind of cut our fillets in here. So we're going to portion it up on here. Again, we have that nice kind of skin, so I've got to make sure I can cut through it. There we go. I'm going to roughly try to get these all around the same size cooking, knowing that the fatter fillets that are wider up top are going to cook a little bit longer than when we get down here to this tail end where they're much thinner. But I always feel like you don't have to leave, when you get it a big fillet like this, you don't have to leave it all in one thing because the big fillet, it means you really are only stuck with being able to grill it or do it in the oven, but you can cut it down and you can actually pan-sear it as well.
Do you have a preferred olive oil to cook with?
I really do not. I actually am pretty much like all olive oils because when you're cooking with it, you're not really being stuck with the flavors as if you are using it as like dipping in your bread or whatnot. But I'm a girl who likes butter on their bread instead of dipping it in oil. So I really am not a huge stickler. I know some people swear by their olive oil or whatnot. For me, it's whatever's on sale. And I will say, Publix always does, like every week, a different one of the oil brands there go on a buy one, get one free sale. So.
And does Steelhead Trout have bones?
It does have bones, but when you get it, this one's already, when you bought it from Costco, they've already deboned it. Now, occasionally you might still get one in there if they've missed it. But I do find that Steelhead Trout has less bones in it than, say, salmon. I feel like salmon, because it's a thicker fillet, a lot of times they miss a bone or two in there. Okay, we'll get this ready for our green beans too. So I put in about a tablespoon of olive oil in here. We're going to do a mixture of olive oil and butter when we sear off our fish here. I'm going to start turning it on. And that's going to give us the nice flavors of our butter, but allows you to cook it a little bit higher than if it was just straight up butter. Butter has a lot lower burning point because of those milk solids. But if you mix it with the olive oil, you can cook it a little bit higher because that olive oil kind of protects those milk solids a little bit more. So we'll add that in there. And then once we've got this nice and hot, we're going to pan sear these face down first, which means we'll have our top go down so that the pretty side, that's the pretty side, will end up pretty. Always do it presentation side down first. Okay, I'm going to slide my herbs over here. Let's get our onions sliced up for our green beans and onions that we're going to have with our trout and our saffron. I was going to say risotto. I wanted to make a risotto, but I didn't have any of the risotto rice. I need to restock on it, so we're just doing a lovely saffron rice. But a risotto is delicious. Saffron risotto was the first risotto I learned how to make when I was a kid. And it was really big because at the time I was like watching Hell's Kitchen, and he always made this. It wasn't saffron risotto, but he either made the mushroom risotto or spring pea risotto in there, and I always watched it. And so I love saffron, so I was like, oh, I'm gonna make a saffron risotto and saute up some seafood, so to kind of make a similar concept around a like a paella, but with a risotto. It was delicious. Okay, let's get in here. We're gonna get our onions in here. I did long and skinny because, again, I want them to kind of cook up and be in the same kind of similar pattern as our green beans. So long and skinny, just like the green beans, so they complement each other in the pan. Wash my hands. Okay, we've got our onions in there. Once our butter is completely melted, it's got a good sizzle, and we'll know to drop our fish in. I'm going to cook since I can't fit all of my fillets in the pan at one time, I'm going to cook my fattest fillets first. That way I can, they can sit and rest a little bit longer than my skinnier kind of fillets. I'm going to break some of my longer green beans so they're not too long. Okay. Since we've got a good sizzle on here, I'm going to grab my tongs. We'll put our first set of fillets in, and grab my fish spatula and a pair of tongs. Again, I'm going to do my fattest side first, and we're going to put them presentation side down, which means I'm going to have my skin side facing up. There we go. And I think I can fit 4 in here. That way I can get the last ones on. Last things. Make sure you leave a good little space between each one. That way you get the proper heat going up the sides. You don't want them all kind of sitting without that heat going up, or it's not going to cook as evenly. Start here, and then we'll do a little rotation. Let's get our green beans kind of finished, snapped here in half, just because you don't want them too long. And then we're going to mince up some garlic to throw in with our onions as well. We'll check on our rice. And we'll be finishing up our salmon. Told you I was going to keep calling it salmon. Steelhead trout. But it is, I will say, I can't find steelhead trout often at the regular grocery store, but Costco does sell it quite often, and it's a lot cheaper, and it's delicious.
A question: are those fresh green beans?
They are. I will say they've been pre-washed, but they are not frozen, so they are fresh, but they're not like picked from our garden fresh. But yes, I'm not a big fan of frozen produce unless I will use frozen corn and peas and things because those are things. But most of the time, if I'm pan searing like a vegetable or sauteing it, I should say, I like to keep it just fresh because the freezing process, all the vegetables are blanched first, which means they're dropped in boiling hot water for 30 seconds to a minute. So it's kind of a partial cook, which means that kind of gives them their little rubbery texture to it. So they're just not quite as nice. Give our things a little toss here. And I wonder if you counted how many times a day I popped a vegetable out on there. Maybe make that on my bingo card, guys. There. Toss this
The
up.
rare thing would be when you don't.
I know, that would be the rare thing. Okay. Let's get our garlic kind of toasted up here, or chopped up so we can toast it in there to add a little bit of flavor. And we'll mince the garlic up. I will say this is, how garlic, you can get it in the jar. You can get it semi-fresh like this where it's already been peeled, but still, hasn't been kind of touched. And then you can get the unpeeled where you have to do all the work. This stuff has a big return. It gives you all the same flavor as if you got like the super fresh garlic that you have to peel and take off all of its kind of outer skin first. And it took me forever to finally like make the change because I was just so comfortable with my garlic. It was easy, simple. And they started making this like in the bag stuff. Way more flavor and pretty easy to mince up. And I used to be like, oh, there's not much of a difference between garlic and garlic. And the more and more I used it, the one difference that I find is that garlic is more pungent and more acidic in flavor. This is minced up, freshly minced up, is just a lot more mild in there, but you still get that great thing, but with a less acidity. Okay, let's get our garlic in here. Mix it in there. It looks like a couple sprigs of thyme got in there as well, but that will just be delicious. Okay, I'm going to rotate my trout. We're going to flip them here in just a second. I always will know that they're ready is when you look on the side, you can kind of see it going up. But when I have a nice little brown crust forming on the very bottom of the edge where it's hitting the pan, that's when I'm going to know that it's ready to flip through. Now, I will say the one thing that you have to kind of think about when you are cooking fish with the skin on, which I think is a great way because it keeps your fish nice and juicy. You do have to kind of worry a bit about any liquids that might get trapped under the skin that can pop up. But look at that beautiful. We've got our kind of our garlic and our herbs kind of crisped up there. Just gorgeous. Beautiful. But this is why I wanted it to do it in the pan so that garlic and those onions will get a nice little flavor. I will say, when I was at Costco, they had one of these. It's a splatter guard. IKEA, not Costco. IKEA. When I was at IKEA in Atlanta, like right before Thanksgiving, I was like, oh, I've been meaning to get a splatter guard because it just helps you, especially with that skin, because little bits of liquid can trap underneath there and they will pop up because they'll escape and then they'll go pop. Okay, we've got our garlic and our onions. You can see our garlic's getting a nice perfect little caramelization on there. Our onions are getting that nice little saute. We're going to throw our green beans in now. Man, overboard. That one's really overboard. I'm going to turn this down to about a 4. We're going to pop these guys in. And then I'm going to add just a smidge of butter in here, not too much, like I'm going to say about a teaspoon of butter. Just gives a nice little bit of a flavor. We'll coat this up. I'm not going to salt them or garlic salt them or pepper them until they're pretty much kind of cooked. You can actually hear the popping. There we go. And then to make sure that my green beans get a nice tender on that, or like tender, but still remain a good kind of crisp, I'm going to put the lid on them, which will kind of give a hybrid of a steam cook, but it will steam in its natural like liquids versus adding additional ones. I will say that is one thing about the Hexclad pans that I love, is they all come with a lid and a steam vent on their lid, which allows them to kind of cook up a little bit more evenly. Looking pretty darn good. We're almost here. I'll know when they're, luckily with these, you can kind of tell when they're done, is by the side of it, you can see the thing, like the fish cook all the way through. Okay, let's take a quick look at our saffron rice over here, see if we're getting pretty close to it. You can see the nice pops of yellow in there. When we stir it up, it will be just about. I'm gonna taste a little bit. I'm going to turn that off. And then we're going to add, again, our little things. We'll put it on here. We're not going to mix it. We're going to put about a tablespoon of butter in now. So a lot of people will put it in when they're boiling. For this, I'm putting it when it's done so it can melt over. We can coat it all up. And that way you get that butter, you get the flavor of the butter more at the end, where when you boil and cook it in there, you don't notice it as much. Okay, I think these are about ready to transfer off. So let me grab a pan. We'll take our first kind of sets off here. Now, again, these are my fatter fillets, so I'm doing them, I did them first because they can sit and kind of cool off and cook a little bit longer. Now, these don't have as high of a fat content as salmon. So with salmon, when you kind of overcook it, you'll start to see white fat coming up through it because it gets firm. You don't get that with the steelhead trout because it's not quite as fatty.
Question, besides saffron, is there anything else with the rice?
There is some chicken bouillon in there. So it's pretty simple, but delicious. So that chicken bouillon gives it a little bit more of a savory flavor to it. But it just it really goes well with the saffron. Okay, get our next set of fillets in here. And by pan frying these, again, you really get those, that garlic and that onion really cooks up nicely. Remember, we used a nice little hybrid of olive oil and butter. There we go. So we've got our nice kind of fillet there. Remember, leave a little gap between each one because if you don't, it's not going to cook as evenly through there and you could get some raw edges on it. That's why, like, if you cook a huge fillet, it takes a lot longer to cook because that big fillet, you have to cook it more to get through it. But when you slice it up, each piece will cook faster, which prevents your fish from drying out, which I think is nice. Okay. Again, presentation side down first. That is going to allow you to have this nice, pretty, like crunchy edge on top of it with it. And that is our like sauteed garlic, onions, and thyme. And then we'll flip it over and then we'll do the skin side. And that skin side acts like an insulator, so it will keep your fish nice and juicy and tender on there. And then, you know, kind of prevents it from drying out. Here are our beautiful green beans. You can see they're already starting to turn this nice, vibrant green. That's when you know that they're getting to this nice, tender, crisp stage where you've got they're tender but still have that little firm texture to it, which I find is like the perfect, because you don't want your green beans to get mushy and you don't want them rubbery either. So it's kind of that perfect where you can bite through them, but you still have a little bit of that crunch to it. Pop this on. Then we'll season them up with some garlic and garlic salt and black pepper. But let me grab my black pepper over here. Oh, and we're going to grab some onion powder on here. And we've got about 2 minutes left on our almond pastry, and we will be about ready to serve up here in just a second. So I'm going to sprinkle my onion powder over these. This is actually the thing I love. We have onions in here, but the onion powder is going to like cling to the green beans and give it so much flavor, extra flavor. Black pepper is a key here. It really enhances the green beans, adds a little bit of kick to it, but it's not spicy, but it is nice. I use a good amount. We're going to use, between a teaspoon and a half a teaspoon. So around there, but good amount of the black pepper. And then we've got our garlic salt. Sprinkle it around. Okay. Let me check on our salmon or our steelhead trout. It just reminds me of that time I was cooking with the with yellow squash, and I could not for the life of me stop calling it zucchini. Beautiful. Look at that. Now these are much thinner, so they cook up a lot faster. But do you see how we've just got that beautiful kind of lovely sear on it? Now again, if you have a splatter guard, put it on. If you could do a lid or drape a big paper towel over it, as long as you don't have a flame, if you just have an electric. Putting a lid on it, the problem is when you end up steam cooking it with a mesh end like this, it kind of prevents the steam from building up in there and steaming your fish. So it just allows that high heat to kind of cook it. Okay, let's coat up our green beans here. Beautiful. And let's give you can see our butter is nice and melted. And remember, I turned off the heat. So we're just going to let me grab a fork first. We're going to fluff it, and then you can have your spoon for it. But use your fork to fluff your rice versus using a spoon, because you see how it just flakes apart much nicer. If you use a spoon, it's going to clump together. Beautiful. So treat your rice like quinoa or couscous, where you got to fluff it. Okay. Let's check these out. I'm going to take off our salmon first, then we'll grab our pastry out of the oven. Or actually, I don't even need to take these off. We're just going to turn them off, and we'll slide them right up here so that they stop cooking. I'll leave that on there. Let's go grab our almond pastry out of the oven, and then we will be ready to serve up. Now with almond pastry, it is like a brownie where it has to sit for about 20 to 30 minutes before you serve up, because that filling needs to cool and let it kind of come firm up. So here we've got our beautiful almond pastry. We got a little bit of leakage out, but that is a-okay. There. We're going to let this our almond pastry, cool up. Again, you can't cut into it until it's completely cool on there. You have this nice kind of blonde. This is the sugar that's melted on top. And then when it cools, it will kind of form a nice little crystallization that will add this just great little flavor to it. But we're going to let it cool, and then we'll cut it up later, and it will be just like a lovely bar with this flaky crust on the top and the bottom. Let's get ready to serve up dinner. slide all of this out of the way. Get our plate. Okay. We got our green beans, our saffron rice, and our delicious trout. We need a scoop. Okay. And let me grab my tongs. For dinner tonight, we have our saffron rice that we made using jasmine rice. We added in chicken bouillon and saffron petals in here, so it has this nice golden yellow coloring to it. We will serve it with our black pepper and caramelized onion green beans. And then, of course, the star, we've got our lovely steelhead trout that we seasoned up with garlic, fresh garlic, green onions, and thyme. And then for dessert, once it's completely cooled down, we will cut our almond pastry into bars and enjoy a delicious little treat. But again, it has to cool down and firm up just like a brownie. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of our recipes at home, you can just go to our page, search for what we made, our steelhead trout and saffron rice, and you can watch and cook along with me again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets. I've got my hex clad, my all clad, my knives, my cutting boards, bakeware, all the different things I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.